Bright Cutie. Every student matters.
Now, let us discuss the back exercises of the story. Okay. Why did the Duke go to Paris? So, Duke went to Paris because he got to know about France losing on the French ground, and he got annoyed and wanted himself to be a part of the army, and that is why he went to Paris. Describe the place the young Duke went to. So the young Duke went to a tavern. We have read that that tavern was a dreadful place. It was whitewashed with blood. The roof of the tavern was broken by a big shell, and around the tavern there were shady gardens, and one could see the lead clouds from the tavern. What was the Duke's state of mind as he stood at the door of the tavern? So, when the Duke stood on the door of the tavern, he remembered about his life. He remembered about how difficult it was going to be for him to get accustomed to this kind of a life, to get accustomed to this kind of a hard life. What thoughts crossed the Duke's mind while having hard bread? So, while the Duke was having hard bread, he remembered about the good breakfast, the hygienic breakfast with cutlets and buttered eggs he would have at Cafe Agnes. What happened when the Duke threw away the rest of his bread into the mud? So, when the Duke threw away the piece of bread into the mud, he saw a soldier come out of the tavern, stoop down, pick up that piece of bread, clean it with his sleeves, and start to eat it. Describe the appearance of the hungry soldier. So he was tall, but he was very thin. He was so thin that his shoulder bones could be seen from his clothes. He had feverish eyes. His beard was a hospital like beard, and his teeth were as white as his skin. Why did the soldier find his dismissal verse? I have already discussed this with you. So the soldier found his dismissal verse because in the ambulance and at the infirmary, he was at least getting something to eat. But now that he was out, he was again going to starve. Whom does the soldier remember fondly from his childhood days and why? So the soldier remembered a kind sister who would take care of these foundlings, and specifically Jean Victor, with whom she would make to sleep at night with her hands very warmly over his forehead. Why did Jean Victor decide to take the Duke's duty? So Jean Victor decided to take the Duke's duty because he considered him to be a very kind-hearted man. Moreover, the Duke was sleeping soundly and he did not feel like disturbing him in his sleep. What end did Jean Victor meet? So we all have read that Jean Victor was shot in the head with a bullet. Why do you think the Duke's voice trembles slightly talking to Monsieur de Saulnes? So the tremble that Duke's voice had at the end when he was talking to Monsieur de Saulnes was because of the pain in his voice, the pain that he actually experienced because Jean Victor died for him. He did not know Jean Victor for a very long time, and he never thought somebody could sacrifice their lives for the sake of the Duke. So this is something that made him tremble and sad. Okay. What do you think of the Duke? Write his character sketch expressing your views. So we have read that, as we know, Henry de Hardemont was a Duke. He lived in France, and his breakfast was his favorite time of the day was when he would go for his breakfast at Cafe Agnes, eating good food, giving good tips to the waiters. Then we also know that he was a patriot because it was only for the love of the country that he decided to forego his life and move to Paris to fight. He was certainly a very kind hearted man because he understood the plight of Jean Victor and he offered to help him and share with him his piece, his ration of bread, and also made him drink brandy. Then we also know that Duke was a true friend because at the end of the story as well, he remembered the sacrifice that was made by Jean Victor. And he remembered that with love, affection, and respect. What kind of a person was Jean Victor, and what does his act of volunteering in place of the Duke tell you about him? So, Jean Victor, one word to describe him, he was a terrible young boy who had suffered a lot in his life. He was an orphan. He had never eaten a full meal at any time of his life. He was a good friend, he was an honest man, as this was something that the sister, the kind sister at the orphanage, had taught him. And at the end, the only reason why he took the duty on the place of the Duke was because he did not want him to be disturbed. So, this kindly shows that he was a kind, a very sensible, and a lovely friend. A Piece of Bread is a story of the bond between a duke and a soldier, justify the title. Now, this title, A Piece of Bread, is indeed the most appropriate title that could have been given to this story because the entire bond that developed and existed between the two men was because of the piece of bread. In the beginning, it was the Duke who threw the piece of bread in the mud, and that was because of the piece of bread that he got to know about the soldier, Jean Victor, and he developed friendship and acquaintance with him. And at the end, the entire cycle came to a complete when the Duke, who had returned from the war healthily back, he came across a piece of bread rolled in mud. He took it up, he cleaned it with his handkerchief and placed it on the bench. This was in remembrance to his friend. This was a tribute that he had paid to his friend who sacrificed his life for his sake. Okay. So look at these words from the story and write a synonym for each of them. So these are the words that were there in the story, and we have to write the synonyms for each of them. Now, engagement was the word in the story. So, engagement, we can say here it refers to war. Startling means amazing or shocking. Acquaintance is when you know somebody, you know, you develop a knowingness. Prowl is a search for something. Opinion is thoughts or expression. Approaching is coming near. Eagerly is excitedly. Reproach is hate, and recommenced is to start over again. Now, the next question says you have to make sentences of all these expressions that you can see. Felt the blood mount is to feel angry. I'm discussing with you the meaning so that you may make a sentence on your own. Gloomy place is something which is very sad and depressing. Abandoned tavern, a place where not many people lived. Terrified amazement is extreme shock. Wretched winter sky is unpleasant and unlucky winter sky. Sorrowful eyes, sad eyes, or sadness in one's eyes. Buttered eggs is eggs which were properly mashed and cooked. Good appetite is eating well, eating healthy. Okay, now this is something that requires your own creativity and opinions. So what would have happened if Jean Victor had woken up the Duke and reminded him to attend the call of duty? Do you think the end would have been different? So again, this is something that you will have to think and write. Imagine yourself to be the Duke and you're talking with your friend Monzoy de Solness, and you have to recount your experience with Jean Victor. You have to remember about your experience and your meeting with Jean Victor. So, with this, my dear students, we come to the end of this story. A very beautiful tale indeed. I'm sure the chapter is clear to you. I will meet you all now in my next lecture.